Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Fife Property Show. And today we're going to be talking about the rules for renters. And this is our landlord guide to your tenant duty of care. So tenants do have duties of care when they're in a property.
God.
And if you...
Now you... the landlord's guide to the tenant's duty of care. It's like let's get this right.
Okay.
It's the landlord's duty of care to the tenant, not the tenant's duty of care to the landlord. Just in case anybody misheard that, and they're straight off like, "Yeah, Bampot, keyboard warrior." No, it's not like that at all.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that obviously, although tenants do have their own duties to uphold, it's the landlord's responsibility to make them aware of what those are. So if you want your tenant to look after your rental property correctly, it's unfortunately not enough just to rely on them knowing every letter of the law and legislation and what surrounds their responsibilities as a tenant. So you really need to keep them informed, or have an agent who's doing that for you.
How would they ever know, Richard? Let's be honest. How many tenants? I was a tenant myself at one point in time, and it's like, how many people, even myself, I wouldn't have a clue what I'm meant to do. You would think common sense would prevail, but unfortunately, common sense isn't that common, especially even with landlords as well, and even with investors or letting agents. This is why we're doing this whole show in the first place, because we know, and we have done a show on the landlord's duty of care and the landlord's responsibilities, but let's look at it from another angle, because it does work both ways, and if you get that right with both parties, you get a win-win situation. Everybody wins out of that. The landlord has a fantastic tenant, the tenant has a fantastic landlord, and everybody's happy as a result of it. Now, this almost sounds utopian, but for 99.9% of tenancies, this is what it's like. If this is not what your landlord is like, because you're maybe saying that right now, my landlord's not like that, that's because you've got the 0.1 of landlord tenancies that isn't going right because your landlord is possibly not a great landlord. If you are that landlord, by the way, I can invite you to leave this market and sell up and go and do something else instead of giving us a bad reputation.
Yeah, I mean, I could quite confidently say as a letting agent on here live that we have such a good relationship with 99.9% of our tenants, and it works both ways, and it just makes for such an easy living for everyone, and it makes people feel comfortable in their home as a tenant, and in turn then obviously makes it a good investment for the landlord, that everybody's happy and everything's working the way it should be. So definitely. And like you say, Jim, what might just seem as maybe general housekeeping or common sense to some people, it might not be to others. And without really specific wording in maybe your contract or your move-in pack or whatever, the door is left wide open for problems and disputes and ultimately disappointments all round. So this is where you need to really keep everyone informed of their responsibilities and duties, whether it's the landlord, tenant, the agent, who does what and who will take care of what. I mean, legally, tenants are required to act in a tenant-like manner. We'll call it.
What's that meant to be? What's a tenant-like manner?
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Landlord. How are you today?
And well, as you say, many have no idea what that really means, and plenty of landlords don't know either. And most of, like, if you're in England, you get off-the-shelf tenancy agreements and things, and they're just really generalised. We obviously are fortunate here in Scotland. We have the PRT. We can add certain things to it, but there is a basic PRT model, which is quite, I have to say, is quite good. A lot of people maybe have different approaches to the PRT.
I think the PRT is actually perfect.
I think
it's great that the government has prescribed a format, just like the short assured tenancy previously, about the basic fundamentals, about the core information you have to have in any tenancy agreement in order to protect the tenant. Because ultimately that's why a tenancy agreement is there, to protect the tenant's interests, but also to protect the landlord's interests just in case it doesn't go according to plan. And that's why they have the grounds. I think it's 18 grounds. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but 18 grounds which you can take action as a landlord on, and only on that. There is no 19th ground anymore, if that's the case, which used to be the no-fault eviction. That has been taken away with the PRT.
Yeah, and it's all mandatory grounds now as well.
So what I'm going to be talking about today, what's the subject?
So with that all in mind, we have put together things that obviously have in mind the landlord and the tenant to welcome some clarity around what obviously is tenant-like manner. And then we're going to kick off with that today. We're going to honestly look at what is a tenant-like manner. We'll look at everyday responsibilities for the tenant. Liability for accidents and damages, that's a good one, because a lot of people don't know where the lines are a bit blurred on that one. Keeping your property
That's a
safe.
good one to cover, though, about
Yeah.
the liability between tenants and landlords, because often landlords will blame tenants for something, when in actual fact it's the landlord's responsibility rather than actually the tenants. So, it'd be good to have clarity on that, because we have done it from the landlord's point of view, but again, let's do it from the tenant's point of view.
Yeah. And I'm sure contents and buildings insurance and things and who's responsible for what will fall into that as well.
I'm just thinking to myself, thank God we're not on TikTok.
I know, we're getting castigated. Keeping the property safe and secure and getting access for inspections, maintenance and repairs is so important. And I know there's been a lot of difficulty surrounding that, especially since the whole lockdown and access issues and things. So from the bare essentials to some of the finer details, we're going to break everything down. That you need to ensure your tenants are 100% clear on their duties of care so that your investment is properly protected ultimately as a landlord or an investor.
It always amazes me, Richard, why someone thinks they can just pay you a simple deposit and get access to your property for that deposit, and your property is worth about 100 to maybe 200 to 300 to 400,000. And they think it's like, oh, well, should I not just pay a deposit and I should get access to that? If you want to buy a house, you got to pay thousands to buy a house.
Yeah.
And yet renting is just a quick, easy entry into that market. So hence the reason why a lot of, we're going to cover it probably, we're actually going to, let's cover it now.
Okay.
This is why a letting agent or a landlord would go to the nth degree to make sure the credit rating's right, to make sure the tenant's got a good credit rating, make sure the tenant would pay on time, make sure the tenant is not antisocial, looks after a property and pays the rent on time. And that's why referencing is so important. But also mitigate the risk involved by de-risking the whole situation by putting things like condition reports in place. So there's no dispute at the end about who's done what damage at that point in time, because if it was like that in the beginning, it better be handed back like that in the end, minus fair wear and tear. That's the key here. Just like you hire a car. If you hire a car, you go around and they go around, look at all the things, you go, got a dent there, dent there, dent there, dent there, and you bring it back and you got another dent somewhere else. You didn't go, oh, I thought that was normal fair wear and tear. No, it's not. It's damage. You pay for it. And that's just like a tenancy. It's the same similar thing. It's like it's the responsibility of the landlord or the letting agent to make sure that's covered, and not the responsibility of the tenant really, but the responsibility of the tenant, like you say, to make sure they act in a tenant-like manner. It's quite interesting. Like, come on then, tell me, what is a tenant-like manner?
Right. Okay. So if we go right into it, I mean, despite the lack of awareness over exactly what counts as a tenant-like manner, the standard was effectively set way back in the 50s, 1953, in a judgment by Lord Denning and the Warren v. Keene tenancy dispute.
Warren versus Keene? I have no idea what that is.
I didn't either, really, to be fair.
I was going to be real up there and go, yeah, Warren versus Keene. So it is.
No, but this is where it comes from. So he ruled that the tenant must take proper care of the place, and that is obviously carry out little jobs around the home that a homeowner would normally do, such as changing fuses, unblocking sinks, and cleaning the windows and things. So cleaning windows is things they need to be clean, provided in a clean state to begin with. Yeah, and then the
changing fuses,
changing light bulbs is one that's it's really common that we get. But yeah,
I've had it before. I remember in my early days, you probably get it quite a lot because I don't deal with it anymore. But I remember when I managed my own property, it was like, my light's gone out in the living room, and what you want me? Could you come round and change the light bulb? Sorry, It's like, but you've got it, you've used it, so it's up to you to replace it. That's the point.
Yeah.
It's no, I'm not there to do everything meant to. You're meant to do that as a tenant. These are, yeah, you're exactly right. What they say is that it's actually classed as normal tenant duties.
Yes.
So yeah, unblocking sinks is a classic as well. It's
Much
like, my
like
toilet is blocked. My
home.
toilet is blocked. How is your toilet blocked? Well, my kid was playing with her toy and it fell down the toilet and we flushed it away. And it's like, that's why it's blocked. Because
Yeah.
the guy goes down with his, from Dining Rod or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and unblocks it, and he goes, on the camera, there was a kid's toy. Or sanitary towels. Got to say it, Flipping
baby wipes is such a common one.
Baby wipes, all put down the toilet with some people, and it really blocks everything up. Now, that is not the landlord's responsibility to get that. Chip fat's another one. I'll just pour the chip fat down there. All of a sudden, it congeals on the pipe itself, and then you're back to this blocked sink. So you've been given the toilet's unblocked, the sink's unblocked, everything's unblocked. So it's the tenant's responsibility to unblock it, unless it's something like the drain's caved in or something.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Or possibly a next door neighbour has blocked it because you've got mutual drains that are actually attached to each other.
That's sometimes a common thing, or sometimes it could back up from the street where then it falls into a Scottish water issue. There's several different things, but it is quite common to find, baby wipes and toys and things in there, and that's down to the tenant, and it could be a tenant chargeable repair as well if it's found to be that it's a.
Well, we do talk about that, don't we? The first thing when you're called out to that is the duty of care as a landlord. It's like they've got no flushing facilities, so no sewer. So, okay, let's get it unblocked. Yeah. And then the contractor then says, well, when I was round there, it was chock-a-block with, wipes or something like that, or it was a kid's toy, or it was chip fat, it congealed, and then you go, it's a chargeable event. So a tenant is actually told that before they go out, don't they?
Yeah, when there's there isn't really a lot of time to troubleshoot with a blocked toilet, and sewage and things is an emergency repair, especially if there's only one toilet in a property. So it's basically, like you say, get it fixed, and then let's establish how that happened. And and we make the tenant aware if we find out that it's due to a toy or whatever, or your negligence, the bill could come back to you as the tenant, and they are made aware of that. Yeah. So yeah. And then that kind of falls into the next point, that obviously avoiding damaging the property that they rent, either unintentionally or through their own neglect. That is something that you're expected to uphold as your tenant duty, and not be expected to repair or pay for anything caused by fair wear or tear or passage of time. Like you say, there's a difference between wear and tear over a certain period of time, or something that has been damaged over a course of maybe 6 months to a year. That's damage.
Look at Arthur. 20 years in a property.
Yeah.
It's like, he goes and moves out. Carpet's a bit worn. I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably been there a lot less than 20 years because he has had the carpets replaced over that time. Mm-hmm. But that's a great example about after 10 years. It's like if the carpet's worn back and forward, and there's a big, and you can't do anything about that, and it just looks worn. It's like that's fair wear and tear. That's no damage.
And in all fairness, when he left, we had, in the course of the years leading up to leaving, we put the new kitchen in, we put the new heating in, so there was new radiators, things. And by the time it left, I think it was a lick of paint and new flooring, and it was back on. It was
but even scuff marks on walls and that. How do we sit with that in terms of damage or repairs or responsibility?
Well, say we're in a high traffic area like a stairway or a hall. If a tenant's been in there, like I say, 6 months, a year, and you go in and there's scuff marks up the wall or on the skirtings, that's damage and neglect. If it was 5 years down the line and there's a few scuff marks up the skirting or the wall in the hall, then I would say that's wear and tear.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely.
Yeah. That's a judgment
call. Hopefully that'll clarify for some of the tenants that are actually tuning into this podcast. Basically, it's all a matter of measure about how long you've been in the property versus what's actually the damage, the extremity of the damage. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Like even if you've been in a property for 5 years, but if you come in and there's a big iron mark burned into the carpet, that's damage. It's not wear and tear.
So then let me ask this next question: with the basic fundamentals of the framework of the tenant responsibilities, when we explored deeper into this, the ways that your tenant should be taking care of your property, how would that look then? What would be these
So it
everyday
would look then,
responsibilities for tenants?
so everyday responsibilities and things that the tenant needs to think about. And while landlords are responsible for maintaining and repairing the fittings and the appliances that they supply as part of the property, tenants do have a duty of care to use things correctly and to pay for any misuse. Do you know, if you've got like, for example, if there was a washing machine in the property and provided as part of it, if you're using that incorrectly and filling it full of product and all the rest of it, and it ends up malfunctioning, then it's the tenant's responsibility for its repair or replacement. But therefore, the tenancy agreement therefore a tenancy agreement should make it clear that the tenant is responsible for things like this. It's in the PRT, and down in England, you could modify it a lot more than what we can. But things like defrosting a freezer, replacing filters on cooker hoods, and in the tumble dryer as well, descaling washing machines and dishwashers. Do you know if you've got them in place? Do you know that you have to rinse them through so often with certain, is it Calgon for your washing machine, and you get whatever for your dishwasher? That's a tenant responsibility.
Product available.
Yeah, we're not endorsing it or anything, but and cleaning
like Calgon. And the ticker tape on the top of here.
I know the tune, but I won't sing. And then cleaning ovens and the appliances and things to ensure that their functionality is upheld and that they're looked after correctly. Although they're provided as part of the let, it's the tenant's responsibility to care for them.
That then brings me back on to then what I spoke about in the beginning about the drains and keeping them free from blockages and no pouring oil or fat down the drain in the kitchen sink or flushing even sanitary products, as we said before, and other unsuitable items down the toilet.
Action man.
Yeah, I didn't knock it. It happens, and people, I remember at our golf club, for example, somebody had obviously gone into somebody else's pocket. And then they're taking the money out and they put the wallet in the U-bend of the toilet. So when they went to unblock it, they found the empty wallet in there. Because they wondered what's happened to this guy's wallet, and that's where it had gone. But minus everything else that was in there, it could have been taken. So it's easy enough to block that as a result of it. This then brings me back to things like what's your thoughts then on is it a tenant's duty to sort out mold and stuff like that in bathrooms, and how would they go about that?
So mold and condensation, and so that's a big one. Preventing mold in kitchens and bathrooms. Tenants are responsible for ventilating during and after baths and showers, and keeping baths and shower trays clean, and clear of bottles and products and things that build up in the corner, like shower enclosures or bath units and things as well. And also there should be ideally a ventilation system in the kitchen and the bathroom, and there should also be windows, and you need to keep them open and keep these running when you're using these facilities.
This is what gets me, and I'm not going to defend anybody here, but I'm going to point this out. When you get the news, like the BBC or ITV or whatever it is, a newspaper, and they castigate a landlord for the amount of mold built up in a property, but the reality is the mold's built up because the tenant's actually refusing to do anything or clean anything. And it's just the normal day-to-day use, and they just allow it to build up regardless.
And they've got a lot of things built up in a certain area, whether it's, like I say, whether it's a lot of products, bottles and things in the bathroom against the wall, whether they don't open the window, if it's in a bedroom and they've got the walls like wall to wall with stuff and ceiling to floor as well in some cases, and not opening windows and things, that is just a recipe for disaster. And then when that happens,
the impression then, here's what comes next then, out of what you've just said there. The impression is on the television or the newspaper when people read it, it's the landlord's fault. And that's what everybody goes away with straight away. Yeah. But the reality is, none of these people are ever prosecuted. And the reason why is because the court knows damn fine, or the local authority knows damn fine, that it's actually the tenant's responsibility to clear that up over time. And their negligence has caused this problem. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's like, oh, if this keeps building up, somebody's going to get mold and going to get poisoned or something like that. And it's like, well, I'm not surprised because you're not even cleaning it.
Yeah, you're not washing it back, you're not opening the windows and things. But again, it's a landlord or an agent's responsibility to make sure that the tenant is educated to that fact. We provide to our tenants the things like a fact and help sheet for condensation and mold, and how to prevent it, and how to then obviously treat it if it occurs.
So then my next steps out of that is then this is making sure that there's a very clear indication from the very start to keep your tenants conscious of how they actually use your home as a landlord, which reduces the potential problems and makes it far easier to claim back any costs in a dispute. Because it's like, well, I gave you the documentation, you've signed it, but you've not followed that through yourself and actually done anything about it. Therefore, there's no way you can get back that part of your deposit because we're legally entitled to that under the legislation.
Yeah, and I know the girls in property management and things, and in the past, on occasion, have actually went out and actually showed tenants, went with a cleaner and the thing, and say, this is how you do it, this is what you need to do, and this is how you ventilate. So there isn't any room for them to come back and say, well, how did I not do that? You've not shown me how to do that.
Do you know, these are all simple things that, you know, are, for a lot of people are actually never passed down by generation. It's like you go to somebody, did your parents ever clean your house? Did they ever clean the house before? Did you ever watch them cleaning their house? Because it's like, when I'm looking in here, you've not cleaned your house at all.
I'm a big believer in that you lead by example, and how you view the people that brought you up is how you're going to, unless you make some big changes, it will always kind of follow down through the generations. And if people didn't look after their homes that you grew up in, then you tend to be like that in your own home. So
it's not even something that they're actually, I don't think they teach that in school anymore.
No, there's nothing like that.
They used to teach that, and I think it's health and hygiene and home economics and stuff like that. We used to all get taught that. Yeah, we all used to get taught things like that. This is what you should do here, and this is how you should do things, and this is how you should cook. This is how you should, and for me, it was like, if I wanted anything done, I had to iron it myself after a while. It was like, Mum, I want something for a night out. It's like, well, I'm not doing it. It's like, oh no, I'll hate to get out, and you do it yourself, and just like, right, I'll get on with it. And that's kind of how you learn as you go, out of necessity more than anything. But these are kind of life skills, and I know it sounds daft, but they're life skills that travel with you, and it's a mentality that travels with you as well, as a natural result of being doing that. And just being conscious of health and hygiene is so important. Not just in terms of having a tenancy and maintaining a house and sustaining a tenancy. It's actually just in life in general. How you do everything is how you do anything. Or how you do anything is how you do everything.
I think it's important for a family unit to have everybody involved in the runnings of a house, and how the upkeep, and everybody having their share of doing things when you're growing up, because it gives you that sense of responsibility, and it teaches you as well for later in life.
But then we go back to, let's talk about it. We'll go back to, it's how you've been brought up in the first place.
Yeah.
If you've just been lying about on the couch, and and your parents did everything for you, then that's kind of how you'll end up being when you go into your situation. You more or less, it's more or less a mirror, isn't it? It kind of just follows you and copies you all the way through. So there's a lot to be said for by where you come from and what start you've had in life, I suppose.
Yeah, we all had our chores and our stuff to do growing up.
So then, let me just go into the next bit then, when we talk about that then. And you talked about it and touched on it at the beginning. I talked about it as well, about things like liability for accidents and damage. What's the situation with that? I mean, what happens with who's responsible for what? And could you give us examples about who's responsible for what in terms of liability for accidents and damages?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, even the most conscientious person can have the occasional accident at home. And if your tenant does cause any damage to your property, then they should tell you immediately. That's first and foremost. A lot of times things happen in property and they don't report it, and it gets left, and then, or it becomes worse, depending on what the situation is. The first step when that happens is to calmly get all the details of what happened, speak to the tenant, and be quite transparent with each other. And some useful things to really include is, your tenant is liable for all damages caused in the property by them, or even if it's their children, their pets, their visitors as well. They've got visitors. Whether it's accidental or deliberate, if there's any damage caused by the tenant or any other, the the property occupants or the visitors, it is down to the tenant to be responsible for that.
Hence the reason why most people don't do this, but they possibly should consider this, is take out a contents insurance policy,
Yes.
which
And
has
a lot of
accidental
tenants
damage
don't
on it.
think that, yeah, they don't think, well, why do I need contents insurance? The landlord's got insurance. The landlord's insurance only covers the building, the contents that they've provided,
And the fixtures.
and and obviously from the liability aspect for having tenants in place, but that does not cover your belongings. Tenants are responsible for making sure their home is reasonably safe for the visitors that they have in there, and their own belongings, and who they invite in or allow into the property, which includes contractors arranged by the landlord. So there's an interesting one. So I mean, that's a tenant's liability and responsibility as well. Now,
this is quite interesting as well, because when you said it's the responsibility, but then I travel back to a time where it's, I remember going round to one of my properties. I'm talking about years ago. The tenant goes, "Look at all the damage that this mold has caused in my cupboard," and I'm like, "At what point did you know about this mold? It's been going on for about 6 months or 9 months." It's like, so at what point did you actually report it to us then? And they're like, well,
we didn't.
I'm just telling you the now. All right, okay. So you happily just left this for 9 months then, or 6 months even, to get worse and worse in the situation, to damage all your clothes, and now you're trying to blame me for it when I didn't know anything about it at all. Well, it's your house. It's like, how am I meant to
You don't
know
have a
if you
crystal
don't tell
ball,
me?
though.
Yeah. How am I meant to know if there's something wrong if you don't tell me? Well, you should. Well, how would I know? How should I know? Am I a mind reader? Do I need to come round and pester you all the time and have inspections all the time? Me personally as a landlord, as far as I'm concerned, you've got the house to yourself. Contact me when there's something wrong.
Yeah, live and let
and then I'll
live.
get it sorted straight away. Other than
Yeah.
that, I'm not here to run your life. I'm renting you a house, no running your life.
Yeah.
Just like a owner-occupier. If you're an owner-occupier, fill your boots. You get on with your house, you don't answer to anyone else. Okay, so if you're a tenant, get on with your life. Make it a home.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to change things or you want to adjust things, then run it by me and I'll give you permission more than likely.
Yeah.
But if something goes wrong, you need to tell me about it or can't do anything about it at all. This then comes back to the classic example of liability. It's when people actually say things like, there's mold up in the top corner and it's been going on for quite a while. Okay, so how long a while? Oh well, it's been like that for about 6 months, maybe 9 months actually. I'm like, okay, and you could see it's damaged the ceiling now, and it's coming down the wall, and it's all over the wall. And what are you going to do about it straight away? And it's like, wait a minute, you've left it for 9 months, and you want me to sort this in 9 seconds.
Yeah.
And what was it like when it first started 9 months ago? Oh, it was just a wee drip in the corner. All right, so you've been negligent as well in the fact of not reporting that 9 months ago when I could have stopped that with a slate on the roof. It's your liability as a tenant, and you're liable for the cost now.
Yeah, and a good point you made as well, and you talk about obviously like if there's that kind of situation in a cupboard where maybe they've got all their clothes or whatever, and well, it's really obviously or it's definitely a good idea to have adequate landlord's insurance. The tenant should also have their own cover for their contents, and they would obviously cover them for their own belongings getting damaged in that kind of situation. Because if that situation occurs and there's obviously maybe they've got a lot of expensive clothes, I don't know, and they all get damaged, then it's it's not the landlord's responsibility to replace or go through insurance to sort that. It's the tenant's own cover that would cover their belongings, and that's where sometimes it gets a bit the lines could get a wee bit blurred between whose responsibility it is. And
do you remember that one? Do you remember that one in Leslie? The
yes,
2-bedroom upper flat on Christmas Eve, or was it New Year's Eve?
It
and
was,
they were going
it was
hell for
holidays
leather.
anyway.
This was years ago. They were going hell for leather at us, and it actually came out on Christmas Eve, or it could have been Christmas night actually, before I was going somewhere. And I actually went in and I looked at it, and then I established that this is what it was. They'd actually just left it all that time, And they decided to have a song and dance about it because their friends came round and says, that's no right. You should be, this should be this and this should be that. And it's like, let's phone the landlord. Let's start castigating them on social media. That's what they did as well. And it's like, you never ever told us. And now you're telling us on Christmas night or Christmas Eve, and you're expecting us to do something about this now when every contractor's on holiday. And yet you've had this like this for months.
I know. It's crazy.
And we know what happened with that. Basically, it was their fault.
Yeah.
They'd actually done the thing wrong. And they still castigated us when I went round on Christmas night. Mentally. It's like, I don't think of any other letting agent who would ever have done that for them. They would have gone, I'll just see you when we come back from holiday.
I don't think there's any other letting agent around here that you would even get on the phone during the holidays, especially not Christmas Eve or Christmas Day anyway. But,
So
yeah,
the point of that is, I'm not really having a go at the tenants, but I'm having a go at the fact that in these situations, a tenant doesn't realise. Yeah, it doesn't realise it's their liability and their fault has caused this problem. If they had reported it in the first place, it would have been sorted. And it wouldn't have had this issue. Now, you can bring up some examples because I can hear some tenants going on now. It's like, after listening to this, going, oh, well, my landlord's never did anything and I've been reporting this for ages. That's your landlord. It's not us, and it's certainly not me, because that's not how I run my tenancies.
That's the purpose of us doing a show like this, is to educate and bring that to people's attention. Like, yes, the landlords and agents have got their responsibility and their duty, but so does the tenant. And everybody, if they all do their own thing and work together, you'll have a really stress-free and streamlined process, and be able to live in your home quite comfortably. And it's all to the benefit of the tenant.
Here's another one that comes up. This was a scenario the other day I say the other day, but other month, about a month ago. Remember that time I told you there was the guy on social media and he was doing it on one of the property groups and saying about the window he's not be able to get a contractor out to fix the window, which isn't closing properly.
Yeah.
To make the property secure, safe and secure. Now, I know as a landlord and also as a letting agent, your responsibility as a landlord is to make sure your property is secure and safe for the tenant. Now, this person actually decided it was because it was on the first floor and everybody else in the street left their windows open at night. And that would be okay for him just to ignore that completely and just say, well, I can't send a contractor out tonight. They'll have to get you tomorrow. While we leave your house or your window unsecure.
Yeah. But you're
now,
wrong.
Where does that stand in? And now I know with that, it's definitely the landlord's responsibility, and they've done the wrong thing. But even worse, they were a letting agent, which is shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
Like you say, it's safe, secure, and wind and watertight.
So the tenant did their duty and actually reported it, but there's sometimes we don't get that, do we? So what's the tenant's responsibility in terms of keeping the property safe and secure?
Yeah, careless behaviour by the tenant can put the property sometimes at unnecessary risk. So it's essential to bring the potential hazards and things to their attention from day one, like we said. But simple awareness is often all you need to really avoid costly dramas, and to ensure your tenant knows that what they should be doing. They need to leave the property secure whenever they go out, including locking all the external doors, ensuring that the windows are properly shut or locked, or in ventilation mode. You could get that the first wee latch that you click it on. That's fine because it is locked to the inside, although the window's still slightly open. And setting any alarms or things that are in place that have been left to be utilised at the property.
You know what I find quite strange is locks on double glazed windows.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't get it, because it's like if the window's shut for you to lock it, right? Surely the window's effectively locked, but you've just locked it with a lock. Because the tenant, in order for somebody to get an intruder, they can't get in unless they smash the window.
Yeah.
But they can still get in even though you've locked it if they smash the window.
Yeah.
so
the
purpose of the lock on the window is completely irrelevant. It doesn't make sense at all. And someone says to me, well, it's so my wee boy doesn't jump out the window. I went, who in their right mind goes out their way to open the window, then jump out of it?
I know what you mean, yeah.
And plus the fact, what are you doing then if you're no supervising your child?
That's true. Yeah.
This is an exact example I've had.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the transoms over 1.1 meters or 1.2 meters over up the floor. So that's the legal requirement. It was probably 1.4 to be honest, in terms of the height. So there's no way the child would actually physically have to climb up on the ledge and then throw themselves out the window.
And then they have these wee locks on the inner edge as well that stop it from open fully. You have to, you know, the safety patch. They also
but then
have
what happens next is you get a fire and then they can't get out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea in terms of that legislation. Sometimes in terms of this so-called duty of care.
And I would argue the point, even the lock on the inside of the double glazed windows could be a bit of a safety factor, because if you lock the window and then you lose the key and then the tenant doesn't report it and then there's a fire, the tenant can't get the window open at all.
No.
And then they're in trouble.
So that's my wee bugbear in terms of having locks on windows. It just doesn't make sense at all. But there's some sort of mystic security put around in people's minds about, I've got a lock, so no one's going to get in. But they're going to have to smash the window anyway in both cases.
Mm-hmm.
Makes no sense. Even worse, locks on top hoppers. What's all that about? You can't even get into a top hopper. It's about this size. It's a letterbox size.
I don't lock mine.
Aye, the top hopper lock. It's like, even if the window's open, there's no way somebody's going to get in there.
That's a long time since I was able to fit through a hopper window.
Aye, it's utter madness. But it's maybe just a fact that it's kind of like in production, it's a universal thing. So in order to keep the cost down, they just produce the same widget for every single window. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
you're right, Richard. You know, leaving the ventilation mode, the secondary lock system, which is perfect. Oh God, drying clothes. That's my bugbear as well. I've got a lot of bugbears. I've got a lot of history. I've got 30 years of this, of built up knowledge and expertise. And what you think might go wrong will go wrong, effectively. The one thing is, I've got condensation in my house, I've got damp on my walls, and then you walk in the door to look at that evidence, and in the next minute, all their clothes are drying on the radiators.
Yeah, and there's no windows open.
Yeah, and it's like, do you not think that's where the condensation's coming from? Oh, no, it's been there for years. It's been there for ages. Or it'll all be cleared up, and then when you come round and look at it and go, oh, well, we'll have to get somebody to have a look at that. And then when the specialist comes out to have a look at it, they actually see all the clothes on the
and the report comes back with condensation.
I'm like, oh my God, give me strength. It's like there's always a reason behind it. So dry clothes in inappropriate areas are not draped over radiators, as this can cause condensation away from electric convector heaters and open flames, as this actually prevents a fire risk. But you need to do that if you're going to dry stuff in the house. You need to have ventilation. You need to make sure that condensation goes somewhere, because if it doesn't, and it's the same with cooking as well. If you've got cookers going and you've got pots and pans chucking out steam, if you've not got a fan that actually goes outside to the outside wall, or you've not got a window open to let the condensation out, that condensation has to go somewhere, and it hits the walls in the house. It just travels right throughout the house, and if you've got all your doors open, the next minute it's in your bedroom, it's behind one of the cabinets, it hits the cold wall, and it condensates there on the back of the wall, at the back of the cabinet. And the one thing you know you've got condensation problems in your house if it's black spot mold.
Yeah, because it's the water, that's the water on the wall that collects, and then that's what causes the mold.
Yeah. What's the other thing we need to look at in terms of careless behaviour, possibly by the tenant, and keep the property safe?
Obviously, electrical safety is a big thing now since EICRs were brought in 2017. But avoiding overloading power sockets, and I've seen it before, extension cables that have got far too many plugs in them. You really need to refrain from using really faulty appliances, overloading plugs. All these gadgets and gizmos we've got nowadays, make sure that they're proper and they're not faulty. And
it's quite interesting though. It's quite interesting though when you see the extension cables, and then you look at the extension cable. It's maybe got 5 plugs on it or 5 sockets on it, and then what you do is you look at the extension cable, and it says something like no more than X amount of amps at one point in time, and it's like if
Well,
you
how
have
could you
every
have
single one of
plugged
them plugged in and on, that is going to be a hell of a lot more than that for that plug. So
Yeah.
how could you make that if it doesn't even follow the British standard?
Yeah, they do confuse me, and sometimes I'll see. I mean, I get extensions, and they've got 3 and 4, but then you get 5 and 6 now, and I think that can't be safe. And like you say, sometimes it says on it it's got a minimum, obviously, voltage or ampage or whatever that can go through it, and it's like 5 appliances, and that would well take it over. So you need to be careful and think about what you're doing. Electrical fires are more common than you think. We actually had one recently. That didn't result in anything major, but there was an electrical fire in the property.
So what should a tenant do then if they decide to leave the house for a certain amount of time? Should they notify the letting agent, or is it none of their business?
Yeah, so if people are going on holiday, if you're in a tenancy and you plan to leave or go away on holiday, usually 14 days, if you're going away longer than 14 days, notify your letting agent. And they should really notify you in this case. So you need to inform, or your landlord needs to inform their insurance company. And this is what people don't realise. If you're going away for an extended period of time, that might invalidate the landlord's insurance if the property is vacant during that period of time. And it's usually about 14 days or more. So you need to make sure that your agent or your landlord knows so that they're adequately covered for that period of time when the property is vacant.
I would actually say to a lot of tenants, and I've had it in the past where a lot of tenants said to me, like, I'm away for the weekend, just so you know. That for me, I think that's quite a prudent thing to do, just in case. Just in case you've got someone, like even a next door neighbour or someone that's at your door that's not meant to be at your door, and everybody thinks that you're in because you've never said you're away, and then the next minute, oh, I've got my house burgled. Now,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen very often, few and far between. It's very, very rare. Once in a blue moon it will happen.
It does, yeah.
But that can actually affect everything, can't it? And then it's like, well, if you told me, and if you told the neighbours that we were away on holiday,
Yeah.
then they could have probably just looked out after your house. These are all simple, common things.
Yeah, you've got a good.
We're coming back to common sense, aren't we? These are all things that are common sense, but it's not that common.
If you've got a good relationship with your neighbours, it's always good to make them aware if the property is going to be empty, as well as making your landlord or agent aware that you're going to be vacant. Or even have a family member or somebody nip in just to check, once or twice while you're away.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
To keep tabs on things.
Yeah, we've had that.
And it's exactly what you would do if it was your own home. Do you know if you were a homeowner, that's the type of thing you would do. The same applies if you're a tenant. During your tenancy and while you signed a tenancy agreement, it's still your home. So
well, effectively, you're right, Richard. I touched on it earlier on, and this is where I go back to saying that it was the way I ran my business in the beginning as a landlord is like, there's the house, treat it as your home, just run things by me if you want to, just to make sure. You can never be too careful, all I said to them. But apart from that, have a great life. Pay your rent on time, look after the property, and make sure you're not antisocial to your neighbours. And you can stay in this tenancy as long as you want. Got no problems with that at all. And now and again, I'll make sure I keep everything up to date. I'll make sure the gas certificates are done, electricity certificates are done. I'll make sure all the compliance things are done as well. And I might even now and again, if you're staying in it for a longer time, I might refurb kitchens, bathrooms. I might even decorate. I might put new carpets in for you when you need it, and all these different things. And it's a symbiotic relationship between both.
Yeah.
The problem here, though, we're about to come to, is how on earth do you get access if the tenant just continually refuses to give you access? What is this? What is the position we're getting access for things like maintenance, repairs, and even inspections? Because letting agents do inspections as well.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a challenge if you're in that kind of stalemate situation. And alongside like the mid-tenancy inspections and things, you should be making those if you're a landlord or an agent. There will be times when you need to enter the rental property, either for maybe just a maintenance check or even to fix or repair things. Now, this makes it essential to know the rules around access.
Yeah.
So this includes your tenant should be obliged within the tenancy agreement to give access for repairs and essential maintenance. Now, that is all incorporated in the PRT here in Scotland. You've got minimum 24 hours notice on a reasonable day or time, in between at a reasonable time scale. Do you know, like maybe 8 in the morning, between 8 or 6 or whatever. Yeah. You need to agree that with your tenant and give them the proper notice and mutually agree that that's what's going to happen.
Can you just enter the property anytime you want?
You cannot simply just enter your property. And it's amazing how many some self-managed landlords and things who end up coming to me, and they've just been approaching the property, trying to enter, using keys, not corresponding. It's a bit frightening.
Where do you lie? Where do you lie if it's an emergency?
Just going to say, except in an emergency situation. Now, I had one recently actually where there was a leak from one flat to the one below. The tenant, we couldn't get a hold of them. The tenant downstairs had come on the phone to us and says, "Look, I've been to the door, I've chatted, can't get a hold of any, blah, blah, blah." We sent, I think one of the girls for the office went up with a key, hit on the door, but it turned out they were in their bed. But the one of the pipes had come loose under the bath and it was dripping into the flat downstairs. Luckily, so that's an emergency situation. We couldn't get hold of the tenant. They were actually in their bed. They were night shift, so obviously give them the benefit of the doubt. They were probably out cold. But we entered, we got access, and they were quite happy because they were like, God, I would never have known. And then it also covers the insurance thing as well, because then downstairs thought that it would be our insurance that would cover it, but it's not. It's downstairs insurance. It's downstairs insurance. So there's another thing.
If it's accidental, the person that causes the accident in a flat is not the person liable. If it's negligence, the person that causes the accident, they are liable under their insurance. Yeah. That's how the insurers work, because it's less likely for you to be negligent. That's why they cover it in the negligence case, because that's the less likely scenario, and that's how insurers work between themselves. That's their rules in terms of how they do it. So definitely, and what happens if you just waltz in anytime you want? Is that a no-no?
No, that's a total no-no. Now, obviously, if it's an emergency situation like that and you enter the property, then that's obviously you're well within your right to do that. If it's an emergency situation and you do get hold of the tenant and they refuse access, say there is a leak and they're refusing access, you still have authority to get your contractor or whatever through the door, because it could be classed as a criminal act because they're refusing access for you to repair something that's causing damage, like a leak or whatever. So yeah, you need to be kind of clear on where you stand. Landlords that hold keys to properties and just think they could let themselves in whenever they like to go and have a wee look around is definitely a big no-no. You can't do that. So, I mean, if that kind of instance happens, you must first inform your tenant that they have breached their contract by not letting you access the property, and what the possible consequences of that would be. And that would be obviously going through a tribunal service or whatever, depending on if you're in England, it's different, obviously. You would then obviously, they would be pursued for liability of the damages and things as well. And then obviously in turn, you may end up want to start taking back possession of the property. Do you know, it could snowball into that. But obviously there has to be clear lines of communication and there has to be the right people put in place, whether it's a tribunal here in Scotland or whether it's whatever down in England. But it needs to be set out clearly. This is worst case scenario, and I wouldn't get too caught up in that. It doesn't happen a lot. If there's a situation like that, tenants are more than likely to let you in and obviously let you rectify an issue, or see that the access to the property in their absence was required, and it's fine. You don't really have a big contestment from tenants in that situation, but it could happen. In worst case scenario, make sure you have all the right information, you know where you stand, and keep the tenant informed of what their liability is if they refuse you access.
Okay.
As a final point, you don't need to request access from tenants for works to access communal areas. So if you've got a communal access for flats and things as well, an entrance hall or a garden area, or if it's outside of a building, then you're fine to have communal repairs carried out without getting consent and things as well.
Did we not have that in Cooper at one point?
I'm trying to think. What one?
East Bridge Street. Is it?
No, it's not South Union Street. It's Southbridge. Yeah, you're
Hybrid,
right.
yeah.
You're right. There's a communal repair. We have 2 flats. The other guy, he has the access to repair it as through his property, and he's refusing us access, and it's just a bit.
It's stupid, eh?
That's
It's
crazy.
like it's like I don't want to give you access to repair it.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah,
What's
and
your
it must be
problem, mate?
affecting. It must be affecting his property as well. So
Mental.
yeah. So that'll. I mean, I believe we're working through that, but it's not been rectified, and we're heading into another winter where it's going
Well,
to
that
rear
was remember when the council came on to me and says how you know sorting this. It's like, how can we sort it if the person upstairs doesn't give us
Yeah,
access to sort
yeah,
it? It's like a
yeah, and
communal
they just.
repair, but we can't get access into it to sort it because this person's refusing to
Mhm.
to grant us access. And effectively, um, that could be classed as a criminal act when you think about it. Eh?
It could be construed as it can as that, yeah, because and ultimately it's causing damage to the property that's not theirs, and they're allowing it to continue to happen, although we've even provided a solution.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, communal repairs and things you don't need to make if it's in a block of flats and it's a communal entrance or whatever. But it's always good practice to let everyone know what's happening.
Okay. So final thoughts on this and final words.
Yeah, I think what you need to ask yourself is if you're a landlord or an agent or do your tenants actually know what their duties of care are towards the property and what they need to uphold as the tenant? And then likewise, if you're a tenant watching this, like, do you know what your duty is? And have you been informed and have you been provided with the right information from your agent or your landlord? And if not, then it's a question you need to ask yourself because it could leave you as the tenant in a position where you're left liable for something that you were unaware you were meant to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So it works both ways. But if anybody watching has a rental property or they own a rental property in Fife, you could click on the link that's attached to this post. You could contact me direct. My contact details are in the post as well. Any questions that we've covered today on tenant, landlord, and indeed letting agent responsibilities and liabilities, and indeed the duty of care throughout any tenancy, I'd be happy to answer any questions. What about you, Jim?
I think most landlords and letting agents, when they listen to this show, I think they'll find it's like, really, I never knew that. But it is common sense, isn't it? And again, as I say, the problem about common sense, it's just not that common often. But I think the best way to move forward with this, definitely, when we talk about landlord guide for tenants' duties of care, is to communicate and keep your tenant informed and give them all the right information and the paperwork at the start and exactly how everything works in order to basically lay the ground rules before we
Yes.
start the tenancy. After all, remember, someone has given you as a tenant one of their biggest tax-free assets outside of their
Mhm.
normal marital home or home themselves that they live in, and you're literally just paying a deposit for that. So if it's like that, then you definitely have a duty of care, as well as the landlord has a duty of care to look after you and follow their rights and responsibilities. And to get more information on that, please feel free to visit Shelter, because
Yeah.
Shelter actually has things like that on it. Shelter Scotland, the body actually represents tenants' rights. So they
Mhm.
do have things like that on it. Also, Edinburgh Council has a lot on it. Fife Council has that as well on their website. Who's responsible for what? So, Google it and check out for your local authority, because more than likely they'll have something on their website as well.
Also, a good one for Fife is Fife Private Rented Solutions. If there's any issue, they're really good. And they're one of your points of contact for referral for tenants in a lot of situations, and they would help keep you right as well.
Yeah, good.
Okay. But yeah, you're right. Communication and information is the key things here. And I think to set it out clearly in the beginning, in like a move-in park or when the tenancy starts, is key.
Perfect.
Okay.
hmm
Good. We'll leave it there today. Thanks for joining in, Jim. Thanks to everybody for listening. You could catch us on a rerun if you want to catch us on the podcast or whatever, or on the YouTube channel. You will see this one again. But until next time, Jim and I will see you later.
Bye for now.